Okay, well, then let's get started. And I'd like to welcome everyone to our webinar today. I'm Jim Reed, one of the show directors of the Garden Center Show. The Garden Center Show was created to fill a void in the industry that we unfortunately had to experience these last 2 years because of the pandemic. So now we can finally get back together again so you can search for your next bestseller or find a solution to one of your biggest headaches through the show's education program. And when was the last time you had dinner with one of your fellow independent garden centers? Now you can by attending the Garden Center Show August 9th through the 11th at the Wisconsin Center in Milwaukee. We're excited to bring you our third webinar in our pre-show series, and this one is on visual merchandising with, if I can pronounce this right, Biophilic inspiration. Joe and Genevieve will explore for you ways to include more biophilic connections with great visual merchandising moments. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to Joe Baer of Zen Genius and Genevieve Mills from Oakland Green Interiors. Joe is the co-founder, CEO, and creator of Zen Genius, which provides visual merchandising, special events, and creative direction. His career encompasses over 30 years of experience working with many of the top retailers. His passion, drive, and enthusiasm for visual merchandising and amazing retail experience leads him to motivate and energize audiences around the world. Genevieve Mills is Chief Operating Officer and in-house counsel for Oakland Nursery, LLC, and Director of Oakland Green Interiors. She spent several years as a negotiator and trial attorney for the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office and uses those skills in her position overseeing various departments of Oakland Nursery. Genevieve holds her Bachelor of Arts in European History from Boston College, her Master of Arts and degree in South Asian Art History from The Ohio State University, and a Juris Doctorate from the Moritz College of Law at The Ohio State University. She is a certified trainer for green plants for green buildings and currently serves on a variety of green industry boards. She is a vocal champion of local and small business ownership, and in her free time is a passionate cook, baker, and gardener. So without much further ado, I'd like to turn this over to Joe and Genevieve.
All right.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. So, hello, everybody. Hope you're all having a wonderful day wherever you are, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar with the Garden Show. So excited for this, and it's a pleasure to be here and talk with everybody about this interesting topic on biophilic inspiration, but specifically for visual merchandising and garden centers. Also excited, hopefully we'll see some of you in Milwaukee, August 9th and 11th, where I'm going to be doing a presentation there on visual merchandising. We're going to get our hands dirty together. So excited for that conference. I also saw one of my favorite, my mentor and friend David Kepron's going to be talking about brands, brains, and buying. So look forward to seeing everybody there. But today we're going to be talking about visual merchandising, but specifically with biophilic inspiration. And I know this is a design term everybody's been hearing. It's one of the hot buzzwords, even though it's something that we've been paying attention to for a while. And as Jim mentioned, my name is Joe Baer from Zen Genius. Really, we specialize in visual merchandising, creative direction, and creating great customer experiences for everybody out there with all types of retailers. I've been working with the garden center industry for a long time and really love everybody that's a part of this amazing industry. As a visual merchandiser, I like to remind everybody we're sort of a jack of all trades. We are there to help merchandise the store, make sure it's a great experience. Sometimes we're working with a hammer or a hot glue gun. Sometimes we're on our computers looking at, sales history or looking at floor plans or creating graphics. But it's an exciting job. If you're a visual merchandiser out there, my hat off to you because I know how much work goes into it. And every great visual merchandising program first has a visual strategy, a thought process behind your brand, and how you want your store experience to work for the customers. What's the strategy and how you set up your garden center or your retail store, or how often you change it, or, do a floor set or bring in, some sort of a new element. Every visual merchandising has your core program, like your core visual elements, your core fixtures, the elements that reinforce your brand that might be permanent. They might be a part of your store experience. And then you might also layer in seasonal elements where you're bringing in elements for spring or for summer or for a special holiday or a special event or promotion that you're happening. Or perhaps that's where biophilic inspiration comes in with your seasonal elements. We also pay attention to the marketing initiatives and the graphics and how those messages layer into the store experience. And then also paying attention to the lighting and the technology, and how that plays into the store experience and how your customers are seeing elements in the store. And then, of course, the merchandising standards, how your product is merchandised in the store and what your capacities are. So we're looking at a lot of the core fixtures, elements that you have. Maybe you have your core brand props that happen every day in and day out. And then maybe there are seasonal layers that you bring in, including technology, which I think is becoming a part of the visual merchandising world. Genevieve, I'm excited to ask you about LED screens and how that comes into play. But some of the basics that I like to reinforce are goals of visual merchandising and what we're trying to do. Really, we want to maximize how you arrange and display the goods or the products in your store. Visual merchandising is about the organization, the flow of your store. It's also about making the shopping experience easier and more efficient, especially for modern shoppers. What can you do to make them find the products that they're looking for easier, and even to suggest things that they didn't know they needed that are going to make their experience even better. Another goal is that it also elevates the perceived value of your products. Genevieve and I were talking about this also, is how important biophilic inspiration is in elevating the perceived value. So we'll ask you more about that. And then, of course, visual merchandising is really about increasing sales and driving project profits, encouraging additional sales. This is why I put the $ in the word visual as a reminder that we're doing more than just making your store look pretty. We're doing more than, making it a great store experience, but we're really driving your sales and helping to drive your profits. And then as we're looking at biophilia and biophilic inspiration, there are some other altruistic goals that I think we have as visual merchandisers. Things that our work can do, like change somebody's mood by the experience or something they see that conjures a memory. We want to conjure positive energy, and how the store is set up, the colors that we're using, the graphics that we're using. Even sometimes the way the store is set up reinforces positive energy among your team. It can be a morale booster because it gets everybody excited about what's happening. And we also want to create some fun and laughter. I know, working with the garden center industry, that you know how to have fun and you know how to laugh. And that's something that we want to encourage and make sure is a part of the store experience, especially now with social media, opportunities to take selfies and TikTok videos, all of that. So the other thing I love is when we ask visual merchandisers, what are some of your biggest inspiration? What always rises to the top is visual merchandisers are inspired by nature. I know I am personally. Going out for a walk in the woods helps to bring fresh ideas into mind. You get to see great textures. You see inspiration out there, sometimes in the flowers that are blooming or a rainbow that catches your eye, the fall colors. So I think, this inspiration of nature is a natural fit for visual merchandisers, and it's something that we naturally want to bring in, the joy of a sunset or the joy of seeing a sunrise and the colors. And, how do we bring these elements of nature into the store? So that's why we were talking about biophilia. And I had a conversation. Is it biophilia or is it biophilic? So allow me to please introduce Genevieve Mills. And I'm excited that we have such a great expert with us today. So hello, Genevieve. Thank you.
Hi, Joe. Thank you. Thank you all for being part of this conversation. This is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. And I'm thrilled that I got invited to talk about this. I am part of the Oakland Nursery family. We're a garden store chain that's been in Columbus, Ohio since 1940 when my grandfather founded the business, and we've grown exponentially over the years to do landscapes. We have 4 retail centers, a farm, interior plants, which is my specialty, and then irrigation and landscape design. So we run the gamut of the plant industry. And the thing that's so funny is that we and all of you, we live biophilia like in our daily work, and we're sort of just putting a name to what we experience at this point. We all talk about how we love plants. We love plants so much. They make us feel good. Plants make people happy is literally a tagline for a store, I think, out in New York. And people say, oh, I want to spend my retirement working in your garden store. Or, I just love gardening. We all love it, but there's a very real reason why we do that is literally rooted in our biology, which is what biophilia is. So tying that sort of undefinable passion for plants to something very concrete and real is just really, really exciting. And then the applications across our industry, across literally almost any industry where plants are utilized, just sort of opens up a conversation that has huge benefits to us, frankly, for what we do and what we sell to our clients and customers. So yeah, Joe, if you want to start the slideshow.
Absolutely.
We'll talk through it.
And
wait a second.
There we go.
All right, there we go. So biophilia. So biophilia is a Latin term that means love of life or living systems. This concept has been around for a while. It was first expressed back in the 1960s by a German social psychologist, and it was sort of a hypothesis about how humans are innately attracted to nature. Then 1984 came around, an American biologist named E.O. Wilson wrote a book called Biophilia, and he spent his time researching, of all things, ant colonies. And he traveled around the world studying how ant colonies are interconnected to their environments in very specific parts of the world. And basically he came to the realization that we're all connected. Like, we're connected to nature in a very real way, just the way ants are connected to their habitats. And this word biophilia describes this idea that we have this sort of intrinsic attraction to nature. And the reason why we have that is because for 95% of our evolutionary history, we lived in nature. We lived, in simple communities, in the mountains, in the plains, in forests, along rivers. We didn't move to urban cities or start building civilizations, so to speak, until the last really 200, 300 years. So most of our lives as humans, we lived, worked, interacted very, very closely with nature. So we are nature. We're part of nature. And what this philosophy, this hypothesis of biophilia holds is that because of that, we have a need to connect with nature, especially now that we've sort of removed ourselves from what, as evolutionary creatures, we were so intrinsically tied to, that when we put ourselves back into natural spaces, it shifts our biology and it shifts our mental thinking and our responses, and kind of brings us back to sort of where we were, back in the days when we lived with and among nature. So if you want to jump to the next slide.
Great. I didn't realize 1984 you said it went back to. That's
yes.
Amazing. That's really amazing.
Yeah, it's funny because I mean, for some of us, that wasn't that long ago. For some of us, that was a very long time ago. Um, but yeah, this conversation has been going on for 40 to 50 years, but it's only been really in the last 10 to 15 that
Hmm.
the word has become common. And even I'd say even the last 5 years, that biophilia is a word you start seeing thrown around.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a reason for that too, which we'll get into. So this idea of biophilia started out as just sort of this like, oh yeah, we're humans, we're part of nature, we want to be part of nature. So so how does it affect us? So there's some science behind it, which is, if you're a science nerd, this is really fascinating. We have two systems that regulate our nervous system. We have the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system. There we go. Perfect. That's good. Yeah. And the sympathetic system controls our cognitive function. It's the thing we're using when we're thinking really critically. We have to make decisions. Um, it's the fight or flight system too. It's the system that says, I'm being chased by a bear. Do I fight it or run? And
That's
that's
me chasing you.
yeah. I don't know if you guys can see Joe, but he's in my little picture box. He's making he's like bear hands. Um, but yeah, so that's the system that, like, it's the life and death system. Back in the day, it was the like, how do I stay alive system. Nowadays, it's how do I write this TPS report and get it in on time kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, the parasympathetic system is what controls our internal systems like relaxation, digestion, um, sleeping, all of those things that sort of happen internally that just have to happen, sort of automated. When those two systems are in balance, we're in homeostasis, and that's a good place to be. We need both of them, and we need them both to be higher or lower in various circumstances. The problem arises when our sympathetic system kicks in the high gear and stays there for too long. So
Mhm.
when you're needing to make a critical decision, it's good to have that. But if you are in a state of constant anxiety because you're in fear or stress, that system is running sort of running an overdrive in a car, like if you're in too low of a gear, um, and it starts to wear on your body. Um, if you so you like if you were in a fight or flight situation for a long time, you get emotionally tired, you get emotionally drained, so you need to find balance in that. So what scientists started studying is that when you show people images of nature or physically put them into natural settings, there is a measurable shift in the activities of those two systems. You can measure hormone flows and things like that, and you see an increase of the parasympathetic system activity. It goes up when you see views of nature or experience natural elements. So, and when that happens, your body slows down, your blood pressure can take a break, your stress goes down, and you're actually able to focus a little bit better because you're not distracted by the anxiety of whatever sort of stressful thing is happening around you. Um, so when you show people nature, there's an increase in parasympathetic activity, which lowers stress and lowers irritability. That's sort of the mental chain you kind of got to walk through, and that's the basis for all of this moving forward.
Mhm.
So um, so if you hop to the next slide, um, they started really sort of experimenting with people and places. So urban versus nature. They discovered that viewing nature is a pleasurable experience. And I think we can all agree that walking out to our local metro park is a really pleasurable experience. Um, and then they compared it to people looking at what they called visually dull scenes. And those
Like
scenes
the store
actually
scene we're looking at.
yes, like this, this terrible, I figured with a bunch of visual merchandisers, this was a good example of
I'm
bad
feeling the
merchandising.
stress, Genevieve.
Wait, do you feel anxiety just looking at this? Yeah, like it is. It's anxiety inducing. Um, when you drive down really busy like roads that have lots of signage and like streets, curb cuts and telephone wires, and there's a lot of visual chaos. You may not realize it, but like your body is responding to that visual chaos and in an anxious fashion, and your blood pressure is going up a little bit. But when you perceive a more natural scene, your body slows down. It's, dynamic movement increases restorative responses. And what that means is that you're seeing nature doing natural things, and that actually slows your heart rate down and calms you down and makes you feel less stressed. So, this scene of clothes piled on racks with signage everywhere is not a pleasurable viewing experience. But for example, a dynamic visual experience like watching fish swim in an aquarium, or watching trees blow in the wind, watching fire flicker in a fire pit, or waves sort of lapping on a shore. We all know we like that. We all enjoy it. We all go hiking and camping and go to nature. And that's because when we see those things, we're connecting with that natural movement that has existed since the beginning of time, and our bodies respond to that just sort of automatically. So, how do we capture that visual experience, in our retail settings, or in our workplace settings, or in our our daily life?
Mm-hmm.
If you want to jump to the next slide, this is where the statistics get in and start getting really interesting. So I will say there's a ton of research. They've been doing research now in biophilia for about 40 years. And there's a lot of, and these are all sourced and documented. So if you have questions about like where these statistics come from, I can point you to my sources. But they've done a lot of studies, and what they found is that like there are measurable results that happen when people are in complex natural scenes. So walks in the park, walks in the woods, up in the mountains, by the beach, things like that. You see like your pulse rates go down. You get less stress hormones coursing through your body. Your blood pressure goes down. And then they can measure the sympathetic and parasympathetic activity in your system based on hormone releases. And there's an increase in the stuff that you want when you want people to feel relaxed and calm and happy and at peace. And it's a decrease in that fight or flight system, which I think we could all safely agree that, we don't want anyone walking into our retail operations feeling like they have to fight or flight.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times in retail, different things can trigger fight, or sometimes it's the price of something that can trigger that sort of, fear, or start the stress. Sometimes it's how busy the store is, or if you see a line at the checkout, or if it's just chaotic and cluttered, like that last image we were looking at.
Yeah, exactly. And to your point, you said you like to go for walks in the woods and you get fresh ideas. The reason that happens is that you're in a place where your body feels innately comfortable. And so it can relax and kind of check out. And then it allows your brain to sort of wander, be creative, because you're not focused on whether or not, you got to, kill your next meal for dinner, or if something's going to kill you, or if some boss is going to yell at you, whatever those stressors might be.
Yeah.
And so, that's where it gets interesting with like creativity and putting plants in like workplace environments, because it stimulates that portion of your brain, because people feel comfortable and relaxed. So they're able to think more creatively and sort of ponder things in a way that you can't if you're just sitting in sort of a cubicle with no color.
That's nice.
We've all probably sat in those at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with biophilic design, you had a question, you asked Joe about like biophilia versus biophilic design. So biophilia is the actual name of this hypothesis, this concept. And then biophilic is just the adjective that goes in front of things. So biophilic inspiration, biophilic design, you can have biophilic city planning, anything. So when we use those words, they mean the same thing. They're just basically the grammatical change. I'm clearly not an English teacher. And I will say, I think the one thing I'm excited about this presentation is that I really want people to come away sort of having at least a better understanding of this word, of this concept, because it is being thrown around all over the place. And,
Definitely.
if you can, speak to your clients or even your staff a little bit more after this webinar and sort of explain what this means, I'll have done something, because this is good information that, like, it explains a lot about why we like plants. So if that's your takeaways, at least you can understand and define biophilia, then I'm thrilled with that. Yeah. So when we talk about biophilic design, what we're doing is we're trying to take that idea of biophilia and put it in our built environments: homes, schools, workplace, retail, hospital systems, any place where we've built structures. So we're trying to restore natural stimuli to our built environment so that we can reconnect, and it'll re-stimulate in our physiological and cognitive and psychological connections to the natural world. There's three tools that we talk about when we're talking about biophilic design. There's this idea of nature in the space, and this is the most literal concept. This is literally plants, water, animals in our built environments. Now, we all work in garden centers, so we sort of have this on general lockdown. We literally sell plants.
That was another question. Yes, if we're in garden centers already, how biophilic is our space, just on the products and things we're selling?
I would say generally we are very biophilic, because think about the number of clients and customers that you have that just say, I just love walking into your store, and sometimes I just come here and walk around because it's like a park, or it feels good and it makes me really relaxed, except maybe on Mother's Day weekend when it's chaos.
Yes.
So maybe there'll be some good takeaways to help manage that, because I know everyone's stressed out on Mother's Day weekend. But, to that point, there's there's always things we can do in some of those, like, hard to work with areas of our stores that can keep the sort of biophilic vibe going, even if it's in pesticides and fertilizers and, containers and pots and things like that.
Right.
But yeah, so this, and in a non-retail garden setting, this is the easiest way to get the strongest biophilic response in a person, literally putting live plants in a space. This is where water features come into play, because it's that dynamic movement. Fish ponds, we have a fish pond at, I think, all of our stores at this point now, and people love to stand and just watch the fish swim around. And that's because we're connecting again with that visual, that dynamic movement. So this one's pretty easy. The next tool in the design toolbox is this idea of natural analogs. And this is essentially fake nature made to look real. So it can be natural materials like wood and stone. It can be faux plants. It can be moss walls, things like that. They're organic. They're not living. They evoke nature. They may not actually be nature. And those also do produce measurable responses when they've, experimented with people to see what kind of, blood pressure changes they get looking at, a picture of nature or like a painting. You still feel nice staring at like a seascape, but it's not the same as actually staring at an actual seascape. But this is where, for design, it gets really interesting, because this is where patterns come in. And we're, as humans, are very responsive to organic patterns, fractals, grids, anything that, beehive patterns, anything like that occurs in nature, the branching of a tree, the branching of roots, those trigger us in a very positive way. So when you're thinking about how you're displaying something, the natural analogs thing is a really interesting piece of that. And then what kind of material are you using in your displays? Is it plastic shelving? Is it wood? Are you using stone? Those are all tiny little things that, shift just enough our responses and make it a little bit more pleasurable to view, and then internalized into a physiological reaction.
Yeah, that's
So,
wonderful. What do you mean by 1 degree of separation from true nature?
so it's not an actual plant. It's a picture of a plant or a
Mhm.
faux plant,
That's
um, or even an abstracted, metal tree that, would have something hanging from it that looks like a tree, but it's wrought iron or something like that.
that's
So yeah, and I mean, you think about, what you see when you go into a store, there's all sorts of ways to display material and hang things and hold things, um, that could have more of a natural element to them.
yeah.
And and then the third tool is this idea of nature of the space. And this is sort of your looking at your space writ large. Um, as humans, X number of thousands of years ago, we lived in and preferred savanna-like settings with moderate to high depth and openness. And what that means is we lived in sort of plains areas, whether it's the plains of Africa or North America. And then there was pockets of trees and sheltered areas so that we could see a long way, moderate to high depth and openness. And you could look around and you could know you were safe because you could sort of see where the predators were. And then there were pockets of trees for shelter or protection or shade. And so when you look at parks, this is Columbus Commons downtown. This used to be a mall, actually, really ironically. This used to be a
Yeah,
mall.
it is ironic.
I'm just now realizing this, and now it's a park. But you think about what you see when you go to parks. There's big open spaces, and they're sort of surrounded by little pockets of trees. Sometimes there's little promontories that you can go up and sort of look and survey things. That good landscape designers take this and run with it when we're designing landscapes and park settings. Malls are actually a really good example of this because if you think about malls, you have sort of these open areas and then little seating areas. And if it's a nice mall, they have clusters of trees, because they're creating that space where you can kind of look down the whole mall space and sort of see where the hot topic is, but then take a little break as you're walking there. The other thing that this, I think, especially for us in sort of smaller retail settings, is humans really love the idea of surprise and exploration, as long as it's relatively safe. So, when we design landscapes, we think about creating like little secret gardens and creating little openings or doorways that sort of like you can't really see through or over until you peek into it. So, what can you do in a merchandising setting that kind of draws people in, that makes them want to explore, because we're inherently curious creatures. And if you could reward that curiosity, that fires all of our buttons for us.
Yeah. Really great. As I'm listening to this and I'm thinking about, the savanna and moderate to high depth and openness from a retail standpoint, we always talk about low fixtures to high fixtures, that you don't want to block the view. And also where we have hot spots or we have sight lines, that gives you that openness. So you see a destination, where you get rewarded when you get there to that sight line.
Yeah, this is exactly that. You've been doing this sort of intrinsically.
Yeah.
And now you have the science behind it.
Oh, gonna make me sound smart. I love it.
So all of this is lovely and interesting, but like, how is this going to make us money? Is basically what happens. So it comes down to the dollars. So basically, they did all this research. They realized that nature is important to people, and then somebody said, "Oh, I wonder if there's an economics case study for this. So then they started studying the finance side, and they started trying to connect human responses and tying them to financial benefits. So a lot of it was in workplace settings where, plants in offices saw employees with lower rates of absenteeism, or the sort of what they called presenteeism, where people just sort of wander around the office and like aren't really doing their job. And then you're able to say, put dollars on that. You say, people are unproductive for X number of hours a day, which turns into, X millions of dollars a year. So if you can find ways to keep people productive and then also happy employees are likely to come to work. They're not likely to call off sick. All of those things. And so they started tying the sort of financial advantages to it and realized that, oh yes, there's a very real application here. There's been studies done in workplaces, healthcare, schools even, and then even in our communities when you talk about sort of biophilia on a large scale in terms of urban planning and city design. And then obviously retail. So like, we'll just focus on the retail, but the bottom line is there's financial impacts and applications across almost every single segment of our working society. So in retail spaces, what they found is that we know that nature is soothing, and that it actually ends up providing the shopper with a more enjoyable consumer experience. Some of these numbers I probably are older and a little bit smaller, or not as big as they are now, because I think this one study was done a couple of years ago. But $3.9 trillion in the market. Like, I don't know what it is now, but
we're still in trillions. We might be around 7 to 8 trillion now.
Oh my Lord. Okay. So there's a lot of money out there floating around. And if you can figure out ways to capitalize on that, even in small ways, I mean, we know how competitive it is with the online stuff and the Amazons of the world. And, how do you get people into your stores? And it's that experiential thing. And if you can give them a positive experience through plants, then that's a good way to go. So then, and then we talked a little bit very briefly about people being in a bad mood or being stressful to shop. Like, that's a bad thing. You don't want people coming in. One study in 2003 said that 10% of shoppers enter a store in a negative mood. That's terrifying. And I've been those persons. Like, I walk in and I'm like, I hate everything here. I'm gonna buy my crap and go. And then I buy that one thing and go, or I just turn and leave because I'm in such a bad mood. So that's
how I am if I see a line. I'm like, oh, I can't do that now.
Yeah. But if you can make your checkout filled with plants and, interesting things that make people feel calm, then maybe there's a good opportunity there. So if we go to the next slide, this is a mall in Shanghai. It is crazy. If you get a chance to look this up, this is just one image of it, but they have plants in this crazy river pattern that's on all 3 floors, and then a bunch of other crazy biophilic design elements. So it's really interesting. But what they found is that, yes, you see one store, they put skylights in, and they saw a 15 to 40% increase in various applications once light is in there. Light is a huge element. We don't think about it as part of biophilic design, but we are creatures that are originally were dictated to by the sun. Not so much anymore because we all live an artificial life, but the circadian rhythms that we lived with for centuries, we're still responsive to that. So the more bright natural light you can get into a space, the better. And then you think about some of the ideas that are in biophilic design, clustering trees, semi-open spaces, creating little refuge areas. Maybe that's like a charming plant-filled nook where you can sit and take a photo. Water features. I know at our stores, we have tons of areas where we have water features happening, and an active water feature sells a lot more than a water feature that's not turned on. So yeah, invest in that electricity and those GFIs and those, and then all of the mechanisms to get those water features running. And then the multiple view corridors, again, that's that idea of letting people sort of pick where they go and explore and be surprised.
I love that. Just like when you're on a walk, which
Yeah,
path am I going to choose? Which way do I want to go?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. The other really interesting thing that they discovered is that people spend more money in places that have plants on stuff that they would spend less money on. Couple studies showed that people would pay 20% more for an item in a convenient shopping venue. So basically like a sandwich for lunch. A sandwich is worth 20% more if you're buying it in a plant-filled space. They'll spend 25% more for like things like jackets or watches. They'll spend 15% more for specialty items like gifts. So, what that means for us, is thinking about, obviously we sell plants already, so that's great. But then how do you boost the value of your pesticide selection or your mulch bags or even your tools? Like,
Right.
can you display those tools in a visually appealing way using other natural elements that, they're willing to spend more money on
Mm-hmm.
because it's beautiful.
We've always said visual merchandising is about elevating the perceived value of the products in your store. And I think this just really reinforces that. And, what adding in some nature could do to increase it even more.
Yep, 100%. It biophilic design hugely increases your perceived value. This is a photo of the Apple Store in San Francisco. It's hard to
Mm-hmm.
see it, but it has these beautiful trees, and then there's a huge courtyard with a plant wall you can see behind it. I mean, we already know Mac products are expensive, but when you
Yeah.
walk into this light-filled, tree-filled area, it's like a magical wonderland. And so you're happily going to spend $500 on a computer because it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
You
But
don't even know you're spending it. You're just
right, you don't even know because you're so not stressed out and feeling good.
right.
But I mean, they've done some research and asked people like, what is their ideal store? And this was like specific to food stores. And they said nothing about the type of food, but they said they wanted bright, spacious, green atmospheres with nice music that can include vegetation. Um,
Mhm.
they didn't mention anything about the type of food or what they were looking for. They're looking at like the ideal ambiance that makes them feel good.
Mhm.
Um, and to this, actually, at this point, this note that just made me think that sound is really important too.
Yeah.
So obviously, you've got running water if you have fountains in your garden store that you're displaying.
Mhm.
But birds, I mean, and most of us were literally outside, so we probably have the natural sound of birds and stuff. But, if you don't, or if you want to sort of hype that up, or if you have a bird seed section, um, get a bird song soundtrack. Get something
Yeah.
like, something native to wherever whatever country you're part of the country you're in. But if it's, wild birds of Ohio or
Mhm.
Southern California, put a bird track in there like that. We connect with that too.
Mhm.
Um, so, it's not just the visual. I mean, this is visual merchandising, but it ties into all of our senses. It really does.
We preach that in visual merchandising, so I'm so glad you
Good.
mentioned the sound. How important that is. I do like hearing the bird sound or even hearing running water if there's not a water feature. I think those things are
Yeah.
so nice.
Yeah. We connect with that. We really do.
Yeah.
Um, And then basically, again, this is just sort of a general recap. This is an Asics store. I think it's in Amsterdam. But they did a redesign of a bunch of their stores, and they all have crazy plant concepts. But I just like this because it was all up in the ceiling.
Yeah.
But yeah, consumers will pay 25% more. They'll spend longer. As we all know, the longer you spend in a store, the more likely you're going to buy something extra or that one more thing. They'll come back again and again. I think we're so lucky as independent garden stores to like have that like long history of repeat customers. I mean, we have customers that have, their grandparents shopped with us and they shopped here
Mhm.
because their parents did, and their parents shopped here because their grandparents did. And like, and there's a reason for that. We've built something that's, beautiful and comforting and brings people joy. And if we can keep sort of bringing that in even more, that's only going to make everybody happier. Yeah. So
well, I'm excited. I haven't been shopping, but every year I'm over at Oakland getting ready for my garden and things. So I'm looking
that's awesome.
forward to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's finally warming up here in Columbus, so that's good.
It sure is. That's great. Yeah. Wow. Really wonderful. Thank you so much. And I know I have more questions that I want to ask you about, especially specific to garden centers and other retailers. And you've answered a lot of questions already. But if it's okay, I want to go through and talk about a little bit more.
Sure.
Let's start with, biophilia in regards to visual merchandising it at garden centers. And, what does it mean? What I hear a lot of times in the interior store, it's really hard to incorporate plants into the interior and keep them alive. Even in garden centers, I hear them, talking about that as a challenge. But also, since the store exterior, the garden yard is already full of plants, what do we need to do there? What can we do in the chemical area or the checkout area? But, for the most part, it's already biophilic in nature, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But so in this photo here, you've got a bunch of pots, flipping a couple over and planting them up, clustering them. People respond, like I said, to patterns. We know everybody responds to Roy G. Biv rainbow layouts. People love that. So maybe, rework your plant layout or even your annual layout, if that makes sense, into like a, sunset colors or warm colors and cool colors, something that sort of connects you back to like, oh, this is like shades of the sea, shades of the tropics. Tell a story. I mean, we love these garden pots, but I really love them when they get laid out in sort of cool blocks of color, or something that makes you just stop and look at them. And then like, oh, that looks really cool. And then before you know it, you're buying one because it's caught your eye for some reason.
That's great. And then looking for ways, even in some of the other areas that don't feel nature, finding ways to bring them in. Like the areas.
I mean, there's such think about what you've got, your herbicides, your pesticides, your fertilizers. You could, use other materials to create, faux, I don't know if it's a giant, caterpillar or, make a big ladybug, make a, something that's like, I don't, probably don't want like a, aphid or something, but like
I love the idea of getting creative and making, celebrating some of the bugs or the insects.
Like, tie it back to that. This is great because I love the wood on the David Austin displays, and the repeating.
And you talked about incorporating graphics and even having a photo or an image of the flower.
Yes. Yeah. And that, I think that's really important too, because especially with what we sell, a lot of times it's a very small version of what they'll get down the road. So really illustrating the, this is what your, hydrangea could look like. This is what your rose bush is going to look like, I love thinking about things in terms of garden concepts. So, pollinator gardens, native gardens, things that water gardens for, like absorbing like rainwater, things like that. Something that tells a story and again, ties us back to sort of the natural world.
Yep. I love that. Thinking a lot of times I hear people saying, can we merchandise the plants a different way? I know at your store, I always see like, the butterfly plants are together.
Yeah.
That's always exciting. The water plants are together.
Yeah. Yeah.
The checkout areas is also the last impression. I also feel like this is one of those fear points where you can get stressed because you're about to pay for the purchase. So I
Yep.
feel like what can we do to soften that area and bring in more of the natural textures or, moments with plants?
Yep. I like this picture with the color right there. But yeah,
Mhm.
get creative. The stone, the concrete pavers on this is really lovely, but like, wrap the front of your checkout section in like bamboo or wood or,
Mhm.
that sort of lick and stick, peel and stick stone. I think that's what's at our stores is sort of the stone
Yeah,
that's like a facade stone. To just keep driving home that connection to nature, the connection to natural elements.
yeah. Yeah, that's great. Okay, a couple of other things as you were talking about complex natural scenes. And I'm
Hmm.
wondering, what does that mean for the layout or the traffic patterns? Even when we're talking about standards like vertical merchandising versus more boutique or organic merchandising, and
Hmm.
then where we have opportunities for either permanent additions, like
Hmm.
in this example, the trees are permanent. They're a
Hmm.
part of the flow through the store. And again, how you're guiding people through the pattern. I feel
Yes.
like in nature, you do have more options where you turn here and then you can turn over there.
Yep.
So I feel like it could come into how we're laying out the store.
Yeah.
And I feel like changing it from time to time.
Yes.
You know, na-
Absolutely.
nature changes from season to season. Does it make sense to change our floor patterns every once in a while and, get people shopping in a different pattern?
Yeah. And again, it's that whole you feel special because you made that little discovery. And you can't go overboard. You don't want people to get lost. But there is that oh, they changed it. Oh, now you go here. Like
Yeah,
that people love that feeling.
it's a part of that discovery that you talked about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I also love how you talked about the openness. And this one, I feel like you're pulled into the store, how you see that graphic on the back wall. You have the
Yeah.
moment there at the front. I thought this
Yes.
was a beautiful example for a cosmetic store that's really embracing, nature as a part of it.
Yes, and that blonde wood and the stone floor, and it's very clean looking. It's modern, and you got that looks like an amazing plant wall running around
Yeah.
along the one side.
Yeah,
But yeah,
that's the high wall. This is in New York.
oh, is it okay?
I remember walking by and being like, oh my gosh, look at that. It just sort of, especially in a city like that, how it
Yes.
really drew you in. You need a break from the street and the traffic and everything outside.
Yep.
I wanted to talk about, you mentioned patterns before, and that
Hmm.
really caught because I was trying to think, well, how does this relate to like vertical merchandising or merchandising? And when we see patterns or repetition in nature, is that reinforced in our store experience? When you think of like peas lined up in a pot or corn cobs, and then like how we're trying to create rows,
Hmm.
vertical merchandising. I don't know. I'm trying to make this connection between like our merchandising standards and some of the patterns we see in nature.
Yeah. No, you're right on. We do really we love seeing those patterns. We love being able to identify them. Yeah,
Hmm.
I love this one on the right with the scallop sort of containers.
Yeah,
Like that
yeah.
hits all the buttons.
That one
Um,
felt a little more organic to me versus, more straight lines and, um,
yep.
how that makes you feel a little more, like you want to look at everything, touch it.
Yes.
Al-
Yeah.
Also feel we're in, it's not just plants, right? Can we be
Yep.
inspired by other parts of nature, the bees,
Of course.
and
Yes.
bringing in wood and honeycomb patterns, even looking for some of the permanent, like the lighting or more permanent elements, not just the seasonal elements. So
Yeah.
bees are game too, celebrating
Yes.
nature today.
Bees, any animal really. it's nature. It's nature in big and little. So whether it's insects, trees, like this is beautiful. These wood
It,
elements are.
this was a club here that I just went to the other night, and knowing this presentation, I was taking my picture. I was like, look, you know, I love the pattern on the ceiling. You know, that to me, that felt nature. You know, the patterns. This was a little more, you know, straight, where this felt a little more organic. I
Yeah.
love
Yep.
this wall with the slices of the plants.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. It's
And then this
gorgeous.
one I wondered, you know, is this Innisfree? I felt like the ceiling, the impact of that, just, you know, I'm not sure what it is in nature, a pine cone, but it, you know, it is inspiring. Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this ties to like the sort of idea of it's the repeating patterns, and even like things like fractals, which are small patterns that get larger and larger over time.
Yeah.
And people spirals are fractals.
Mhm.
Broccoli is a fractal.
Yeah.
Romesco, the
Minor
vegetable, is a.
crop. Yeah.
But
Uh,
yeah, that's where like the interesting patterns really kick in, and then yeah, rainbows.
rainbows. I was thinking about rainbows and colorization, you know,
Yes.
paying attention to the colors, the brightness, and, you know, reinforcing a rainbow. Then I
Yeah.
want to get into other things. You mentioned the importance of incorporating plants, water, and animals into the environment. I feel like plants is kind of an easy option. We understand how to incorporate the plants, especially in a garden center.
Right.
How do we do that? And we're seeing living walls are extremely popular right now, how
Yep.
that can change an environment. I love this shoe store. Jamie from our team was shopping in New York and, you know, saw Melissa is the name of the shop.
Yeah,
And you know,
this is
isn't that
gorgeous.
beautiful? Yeah,
You
gorgeous.
want to go and sort of lay in it.
Right. Yeah. Also, I was in a hotel and I saw the hotel had this system, the Nava system for living walls.
Oh yeah. So this is interesting. These are we do a lot with these types of products too. There's a bunch of them on the market, but they're little freestanding plant walls, and
Mm-hmm.
they're nice because they're good for like dividers. So if you talking about how you want to direct people, especially if you're in an interior space,
Yeah.
um, move them around, fill them with different seasonal plants.
Mm-hmm. You
Um,
mentioned moss walls also, and I think it was a natural analog, right? So we
yes.
can use materials like moss um,
Yep.
to
And there's
create.
actually there's a question that kind of connects to this. She says, Jen says, how does one connect fully with retail teams on care for live plants in stores? Is there a better plant to use for retail specific spaces, or is that when we choose the artificials and
Mhm.
faux natural elements?
Yeah,
Um,
which I was curious about that. Thinking of artificials, I mean, you know, especially in the store, can we use artificials, plastics, and silks?
yeah, I think you do it intelligently. Like everyone like the hanging gardens, like plants sort of hanging off of ledges or cascading down. Those are awesome and people love them, but doing it with living plants can be very, very challenging. But you can do it with faux, and it's far enough away that people aren't gonna
Hmm.
be offended by the fact that you have fake plants in your garden store, um, but real enough that it creates a nice feel. I think on the floor level, you're gonna want to be creative for caring for live, like using live plants.
Hmm.
And then when you're connecting to Jen's point, it really depends. It depends on the light of your space. Is there a better plant to use for retail specific spaces? Um, there we
Ferns,
use
Boston ferns, are they easier?
well, and this is where if you're talking about the inside of the garden store, your tropicals, your interior plants, they're better keyed for that than planters of annuals that need a lot of that direct sun. So this is where you use some low light interior plants to create um, plant pockets or ambiance, and bring that in. Um,
Yeah. Or do we get crafty and creative? Is this where we're creating a tree or a floral, you know,
yeah.
being resourceful? And that has the same effect, right?
Yes.
a tree that we build out of something still conjures the same emotions.
Yes.
Even a graphic on a wall, like
Yes.
this image where you see the cacti, even a graphic reinforces that.
Yes. Yeah. That's like the sort of Empire State Building
Yeah.
cactus there.
That's great. And I feel like flowers are a natural way that we can bring it in, whether they're real or silk or artificial or paper, or dried even is a good option, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Again, like I mean, we have them automatically sort of with us, but using artificial or paper to like create some sort of big display, live to do something temporary. There's lots of people in Columbus doing really cool like flower garlands for special events.
Oh,
so
yeah.
If your garden show or your garden shop store is doing, a spring event or some sort of special thing, like, make a flower arch or something like this crazy plant dress.
Yeah, giant plant dress. We're going to get you ready for Halloween. How about this plant lady? She's like, becomes a living arch for a photo moment.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
Isn't that wacky?
Yeah.
I wondered about water also. You talked about water elements, but a graphic or a digital water element can be just as effective as a running fountain.
Yeah. I mean, you think about like the feelings that it kind of come to you when you look at like this image of crashing waves and sort of power and strength and sort of the mystery of the ocean. But that's cool. I like that too. Again, like this is more that sort of like one-off from nature. You've got more natural shapes and sort of a mountain-esque sunset kind of thing going on here.
Yeah. And it can be done. I mean, this is a low cost, ripped paper that's creating that effect. So we can be resourceful. How about this water woman? Live fountain moment in the store.
If you can get an employee to do that, then hats off to you. Hats off.
Yes. Jellyfish, does it count for water?
It's another natural. Again, the organic shape of it is really appealing. Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Clouds.
Yeah, I love clouds. I feel like I've been seeing a lot of clouds again also. Another live cloud performance. Some of these are silly. They were fun images to consider. And you mentioned animals.
Yes.
So like a shop cat or a shop dog.
Yeah, people love that. People love shop cats. People love shop dogs. We have shop cats at our nursery. People love to find them snoozing in places, and then we'll take pictures and post them on Instagram.
Yeah. There's this one that's in my neighborhood in the short north, Winona. She even has her own hashtag, Winona in the window.
There's a famous hotel in Nashville, the Peabody, that has the ducks.
The ducks, of course. I had the pleasure to see them once. What a treat that was.
It is. It's delightful, and you feel so good.
So then the same thing. Artificial dogs, a stuffed animal or a dog mannequin or a graphic.
Yeah, I mean, I would think too, like a lot of us in the garden center conversation is frequently around like how do we attract ourselves to, the future garden center shoppers. So like talking to kids, and like we do a lot with sort of big faux stuffed animal things, and kids love them. They really connect with the like big fuzzy, when we do like reindeer at holidays and things like that. And if your kid loves something, as a parent, you're happy to be there. You're happy to see it. I love this little.
For Target, which again, that first image, I thought of these big box retailers, where does it come in? But just the simple cutout of the bear, he's friendly. Simple.
He's cute, but we could do this in all of our, like, think about how it's nice to just sit down and relax while you're shopping in a garden store. Like, do this. I mean, this is fake turf. We could actually use real sod, I suppose, but fake turf, and then throw in some extra potted containers to show people what it would look like to have a nice trio of potted plants by your fireplace and things like that.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
I like this rhino
Yep.
again. We're crafty with visual merchandising, so sometimes it is, finding the right prop, the right element. This is one we created out of burlap. We called it the New Year Beast,
Oh,
sort of nature inspired.
we have a lot of burlap in our industry.
We
So
do,
that's,
yeah. That's why I was inspired by it. We were looking like, okay, what do we have? What can we make something out of? So
mhm.
took a bunch of, extra dried flowers that we had and, dressed them up a little bit. And then we used the burlap to create the texture of the beast. So I know we're getting close to the end here. I just threw in some inspiration from what I thought are some amazing biophilic installations. The Macy's Flower Show is back again this year, big and strong. And, to see again how this floral experience transforms a department store experience is inspiring.
Mhm.
I mean, what you can create, with that and all the ways that you can bring flowers elements into it. I showed this one already, but it's just a wow for me, that the living wall and how that's balanced by the product. I love this one also, the warmth this one feels. And then Timberland has just been amazing with their lab store that they've created. And you get to see, really how nature has just come through in so many parts of the store and moments,
Mhm.
a tree with the moment to relax, the texture behind the walls, the living plants, even the digital elements, how they've incorporated biophilic inspiration. I think it's just wonderful. So I feel like in garden centers, you're already a step ahead just
Right. We
because of the
are.
product that you're selling. But there's a lot of great inspiration out there in the retail world because it is such a hot buzzword right now. So keep your eyes open. You'll see it in nature needs heroes. So come on, all your
That's us.
retailers
We
and
are the heroes.
makers. That's right. We'll be the heroes for this. So I don't know if we had any other questions or answers come in from the chat box, but we can tackle that and I'll come back to you. But just a quick thank you. Genevieve, thank you so much.
Oh, my
you know,
pleasure. I will say I have two sources that I want to share for really good information about plants and how plants help people. Thanks, Jesse. There's two organizations, Green Plants for Green Buildings and the National Initiative for Consumer Horticulture. Those two organizations have tons of great resources, especially the NICH, the National Initiative for Consumer Horticulture. They have these great graphics that say plants do that. That's literally their hashtag, plants do that. And they are so useful as like quick little talking point pieces of information that you could print out, share with your staff. Because again, like what I found is like when if you educate your staff just a little bit about the benefits of why we like plants so much, like it changes the conversation with our clients and our customers. And then the buy-in is just amazing. So yeah, both Green Plants for Green Buildings, they're sort of focused specifically on like the built environment stuff. And the NICH is also just really good resources.
Thank you.
Yes,
And
you guys, it's been an absolute treat. I could talk all the time about this.
Well, it's wonderful, and I appreciate it. I learned so much just, getting to know you and talk. I felt like I had so many questions. Does this count for visual merchandisers? Can we do this? Can we get away with that? So, yeah. Okay. Thank you again. And Jim, I know you want to say a few words. So big thank you to the Garden Center show for having us. I am looking forward to coming on August 9th. I'll be there at the show. We're going to be doing a presentation on experiential merchandising. And we're going to get our hands dirty and we want to create a great visual experience together. Something that hopefully we'll all be taking pictures of and posting on social media. So thank you, Jim. I'm going to turn it back over to you. But I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you too, both Joe and Genevieve. Fantastic. It sounds like the challenge our independent garden centers have now is to go back and just take a look at their store again and find maybe areas where they need to incorporate a biophilic design, especially around the POS area, or maybe there's not that much going on where people come and sit down and eat, those kinds of things. So thank you so much. I think you provided some great information. And you already mentioned that you're speaking at our show, which is great. We'd love to have you. And one of the things that's different about Joe's seminar is that we're going to provide you with props, and that you'll be able to create from his presentation. We'll give you some time to create a little visual merchandising prop, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. And so it's really hands-on and goes beyond you just sitting and listening to a speaker.
That's right. Interactive. We always have fun. I'm always a little nervous because I never know exactly what we're going to create, but I'm always wowed by it also.
I wanted to let everybody know too that by tomorrow, we've recorded this session, and it should be up on our website, gardencentershow.com, sometime tomorrow. So you'll have all the information you need, and you don't have to write too much or remember too much without being able to go back and see everything. So once again, I want to thank everybody for attending, and we hope we'll see you August 9th to 11th at the Garden Center Show in Milwaukee at the Wisconsin Center.
See you there.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Genevieve. Thank you, Jim.
Okay.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Have a good rest of your weekend.
You
Okay,
too.
bye, everybody.
Enjoy.